Welcome to Carrot on a Stick Deluxe Edition, where the carrot is
so much bigger than all of us.
The stick is
amazing,
and your donkey is
Italian, baby!
And welcome to Yold Entertainment. My name is Alex, and as you know, it is my duty, my mission, my purpose in life to help you decide whether that game that you have been thumping for so long is indeed the right game for you or not. And welcome to the 7th entry in our Road to Baldur's Gate 3 series. If you have been following along, you know the score. If not, I'd encourage you to check out the introduction video on the series. We'll leave a link for it in the description section down below. And while you're checking that one out, why not subscribe? So this is what Neo Matrix had to say about Icewind Dale 2. I enjoyed it more than Neverwinter Nights. It really got the full experience out of the Divinity engine, and 3rd edition rules brought many of the mechanics that the game needed. It really fleshed out the combat. While Mason had this to say: I definitely recommend Icewind Dale. Its sequel is a bit meh though. The difficulty pissed me off. Its D&D 3rd edition attempt sucked in my opinion. A lot of wasted potential. But is the truth perhaps somewhere in between? Well, let's find out, shall we? As you know, we rate games according to a system of categories that feels relevant to the genre of the game at hand. And this time, the game at hand is Icewind Dale 2, a Dungeons & Dragons classic RPG with RTS combat mechanics. And when it comes to those, character creation and character progression are up first. 3rd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rule set. We have been expecting you. So, for the first time in this series, we're going to be talking about the 3rd edition D&D rule set, and I absolutely love it. But what does that mean for the layman, or for people who simply don't care about D&D rule sets? In Icewind Dale 2, you create your entire party from the get-go. This means that you have full control over your build, and most importantly, your party's strategy and tactics. You're offered a very broad array of options. You can choose your character's genders, their races, classes, attributes, and initial spells where applicable. This time around you have more of everything. More races, more classes, and more importantly, skills and feats. Skills and feats go a long way in character customization, and though some may not agree with me, I think they were masterfully implemented in the game. Icewind Dale 2 is designed in a way that makes your skills matter. If you spread skill mastery around amongst all your party members, each of them will become a valuable member of your team. Someone who's capable of unique and extremely useful things. It'll even give you something to chew on role-playing wise. There's lots of opportunities for your silver-tongued sweet talker, your bully, your tracker, your alchemy specialist, and your thief to shine. There is this part, for example, in which you must navigate a mystical forest that is very much a pain in the ass if you try to wing it. And it's meant to be. There are many ways to sort this forest out. You may try to gather information on how to navigate this forest from people at camp and from a witch of sorts who lives in the forest. Or, if you have someone in your party with enough wilderness lore skill, you may have him or her guide you through the Fellwood without any additional help. There's also this passage that will almost inevitably end in battle, or in a tragic outcome for the local tribesman if you don't have someone with enough intimidation skill. And later on in the game, there's this girl who may never be able to finish her monk training if you don't have a sweet talker in your party capable of convincing her trainer. In Neverwinter Nights 2, which we will be reviewing next, there's a fairly large chunk of the game in which you won't be able to use some of the best dialogue options, simply because you only have one character and he or she will inevitably lack many of the skills needed to try these special dialogue options. This was a bit frustrating for me at times when I played that game. In Icewind Dale 2 though, you walk about with a party of your own making, and every time someone in your party takes the reins and gets you through a difficult situation, because he or she has the one special talent you need, it feels like a tiny but sweet tactical victory that'll make you pat yourself in the back. I was a lot more excited about leveling in Icewind Dale 2 than in any of the previous games I've played as part of our Road to Baldur's Gate 3 series. And the fact that Icewind Dale 2 uses 3rd edition D&D rule set had a lot to do with this. For the first time since we began this series, I felt like I had real control over the way in which my character evolved. It wasn't perfect, and I still prefer systems in which you are able to tweak a bunch of stuff every time you level. But compared to the rest of the games we've reviewed so far in this series, this was a much welcome change and a refreshing experience. Gameplay. So I'm going to leave the Dragon's Eye dungeon in Chapter 5 out of this review for now. We'll get around to that part soon enough, believe me. So the gameplay in Icewind Dale 2 is your standard CRPG package. There's combat, questing, exploration, and, as there was in the Heart of Winter expansion pack for the original Icewind Dale, there's also puzzle solving. Combat was already solid in the original game, but I think it was taken to a whole new level in Icewind Dale 2. From overwhelming hordes of monsters, to ambushes, to puzzly fights, to tough as nails boss fights, Icewind Dale 2 has it all. There's this part in which you have to choose only one party member to brave 8 challenging chambers at a monk monastery in order to progress to the next part of your mission. This person must engage these challenges without any equipment or help. My druid aced the challenge and made me feel like having a druid in the party was the best decision ever. There's this part in which enemies will jump at you from everywhere, even if you have already cleared the path behind you. This will certainly force you out of your tactical comfort zone. Maybe you'll send your off-tank to the rear guard to protect your clothies while you take care of the group in front of you. Or maybe you'll run to a dead end to hole up there and funnel your enemies into a choking point. There's this other part in which you must take out certain enemies quickly before they use their war drums to call reinforcements. If your go-to tactic up until this point has been to use your tank to pull enemies to your location and have your other party members wait in ambush, you'll have to rethink your tactics and maybe even find ways to cheese it.
Do you like cheese?
Why, yes, I do.
There are also a couple of hold the line moments in which you have to defend the city and a few multi-stage boss fights. And though it can be very tactically challenging at times, none of it feels unfair in the normal and hard difficulties. I also like that there are no bullshit fights that require you to dispel a million spell protections before you can start doing damage. Difficulty in Icewind Dale 2 comes from the design of the battles, rather than from bullshit invulnerabilities, and that's something that I've greatly come to appreciate in this series. There are some minor issues with the combat, but they are to be expected from a 20-year-old game. You can't rightfully tell who's casting what on who because you don't see a small icon somewhere in the screen, as you do in games like Pillars of Eternity or Pathfinder Kingmaker. You can't rightfully tell the area of action of your fireball or your cone of cold as you do in Dragon Age, for example. But hey, there's supposed to be some unpredictability in magic, right? So it's all forgiven in my book. As for the questing, I felt like the original Icewind Dale made a poor case for the whole adventure. It was an endless chain of MacGuffin chases that never made me care about anything that was happening. The first mission you get when you arrive in Kuldahar was to gather whatever information you could at the Vale of Shadows. But by the time you talk to Arundel for the first time, you've never experienced or even witnessed any of the evil he speaks of. And when you finish that first mission, this guy Kresalak tells you that he does not know what is causing the disturbances, just that whoever is not in the Vale of Shadows. This felt like an utter waste of time that was only there to add hours of gameplay, as it didn't change anything in the game, and it didn't advance the story in any way. And when you get back to Arundel with this information, he then reveals that there's this other MacGuffin that he knows about that he conveniently didn't tell you about the first time. Why?
I don't know.
Of course not.
The reason why I bring this up again in this video is that though the Heart of Winter expansion pack turned the original game on its ear, I still wasn't expecting the questing in Icewind Dale 2 to be so different and so much better than it was in its predecessor. Icewind Dale 2 starts with a prologue that tells you just what you need to know to be hyped about what's to come. You're a band of adventurers that's coming over from Luskan to Targus to save the day. So you jump into a boat and set sail. But before the actual game even begins, you already get a taste of what you're up against when the goblins attack your ship. You barely make it to Targus in one piece, and that's when the game begins. As soon as you get off the boat, you are greeted by a couple of militiamen who are barely holding things together in the dock area. And only a few minutes later, you're already in the thick of battle with the goblins. See, Icewind Dale 2 wastes no time introducing you to the baddies. This adds a sense of urgency and gravitas to the experience from the very get-go, and that's something that didn't happen in the original game. Not long after your arrival in Targus, you find yourself aiding the militia as they try to repel a goblin attack, and not long after that, you're sent to infiltrate the enemy's stronghold to thwart the invasion, and while you're at it, you learn that the goblinoids are but someone else's pawn, so now you have to figure out who's all hell-bent on wiping out Targus and why. See, the difference with the first game is that stakes are always very extremely high. There's always a sense of urgency in everything you do, and that gives you purpose. In light of the experience with Icewind Dale, and telling by the comments of many people, I was expecting the story and the questing in Icewind Dale 2 to be unbearably linear, and I'm happy to report that this is very much not the case. Make no mistake about it, there's no myriad of branching paths here as there are in Baldur's Gate 2, Arcanum, or Tyranny. This is what the story and quest design looked like in those games. And this is what it looks like in Icewind Dale. But in Icewind Dale 2, it's a bit more like this. In Icewind Dale 2, there are many quests, both main and secondary, which may be approached in more than one way. For example, if you talk to the innkeeper in Targos and ask him about the spirit living at the inn, he will ask you to get rid of her. If you have a priest in your party, you may straight out banish her from this world. But if you don't, Or if you're all hell-bent on finding out the best solution for everyone, you'll have to talk to the innkeeper, then to Elithara at Ulbrich's house, then to the spirit once again, then you'll have to go to the docks to get an item that belongs to the spirit's husband, and so on and so forth. Did you notice how many ifs there are in this decision? Halfway through chapter 5, you'll have to go to the jungle of Chult, where there's a Yuan Ti temple from which you have to retrieve one of many religious steels in order to summon the evil dragon guardian that you have to kill. You can disguise your entire party and infiltrate the temple and retrieve the religious steel. Or you can go in all swords flashing and kill everyone. Or you can infiltrate the place, kill a few here and there while nobody's watching, and then maybe find a vantage point to lure the rest of the baddies for an all-out Yuan Ti slaughter. If you have a paladin in your party, he will not be able to pass as an initiate, and he will be attacked. If you don't pay enough attention to the Yuan Ti master teaching the initiates outside the temple, you may not know what to answer when the guards stop you inside the temple and ask you questions to verify if you belong there. Again, there's enough ifs here to make me want to play the game again. Although you will inevitably end up fighting the guardian and progressing to the next area in the same exact way, there's a lot of high quality replay value in the form of roads and roads not taken, and this surpassed every expectation I had about the questing. As for exploration, though there are no locations for you to go to see what's up in Icewind Dale 2, as there are in Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2, the game does a pretty decent job at encouraging you to look behind every nook and cranny and try and open every locked door in every dungeon. There's side quests to be completed, people to be freed, and items to be found by being thorough in your exploration, and that's good enough for me. Icewind Dale 2 also seamlessly integrates puzzle solving into the gameplay. There's, for example, this fight that requires you to go to a certain place and do a certain something at some stage of the fight just to be able to harm the boss. And in order to know this, you must have explored the area thoroughly and read through in-game texts, conversations, and tooltips. Defeating this boss is one of the most rewarding experiences in the game. I would say it's a fantastic package. But it's time to talk about the Dragon's Eye dungeon in Chapter 5. Yin and Yang, the little evil spot within the good and the little good spot within the evil. I don't know where the good within the evil is meant to be found in Icewind Dale, but if there's any evil inside the good in this title, it's definitely Dragon's Eye Dungeon in Chapter 5. You may remember Dragon's Eye from the original Icewind Dale, a very long dungeon with many floors, interesting fights, and diverse cool areas. Well, the level design in the first 2 levels of this dungeon is about the only thing Dragon's Eye in Icewind Dale 2 has in common with this same area in the original game. This time it's a clusterfuck of bad game design that will bring back the worst memories from the good old days. And no, it's not because it's a non-linear dungeon in a linear game, it's because it sucks. I won't be going into too much detail about why this is to spare you the spoilers. If I had to go through this hell, why shouldn't you go through it? But I will give you a few examples of the things that you can expect to find here. Rooms in which you are supposed to fiddle with something, but using the highlight items function or having your character search the place does not reveal this thing you have to fiddle around with. Passageways that are open or closed depending on the time of the day, and there's nothing that tells you that such is the case. Corpses and items that only appear if you have had the conversation that unlocks the part of the quest that requires you to interact with these things, even if you have already passed through the area 1,000 times, and even if you have the item that you need to interact with said thing. Red herring quests about finding someone's mother that is nowhere to be found because finding that character is not what you have to do. Items that drop from monsters that aren't labeled as quest items but that you need in order to progress through the game. I spent 3 gaming days in this area having one of the worst times of my gaming life with this piece of bullshit dungeon. But I promised you I would play through the entire game to make a review as part of the Road to Baldur's Gate 3 series. I eventually endured through this torture, and I was ready to give Icewind Dale 2 a 3 out of 10. The part that follows this dungeon is actually pretty interesting, but I was so annoyed after that imbecilic piece of dungeon that I just couldn't wait for Chapter 5 to be over. Thankfully, the next day I reloaded a saved game just at the beginning of this area, which is called Fields of Slaughter, and thoroughly enjoyed its time travel mystery and its combat. To me, there's only one other poorly designed puzzle at the end of the game, but it's not even in the vicinity of the cesspool that was Dragon's Eye. Thankfully, the final stretch of the game washed away those awful memories, and offered great challenge, high stakes, some of the best side quests in the game, lots of satisfying answers to the remaining questions, and an epic final battle and epilogue. As for the Eye of the Dragon, as with most things, knowing is half the battle. And now that I know how it is, I'm pretty sure that my second playthrough, for there will very much be a second playthrough, will bring none of the frustration and all of the fun. Story and lore.
If you attempt to take the Heartstone gem, you will pay with your lives. And for what? The right to bully those who angered you in the past.
The right? If there were any rights to be had in this pathetic land, we wouldn't be having this conversation. My right is strength. The strength nurtured by this world's hatred of half-breeds. Freaks, abominations.
I, too, am a half-breed. When people scoff at me for my mixed blood, I ignore them. I do not stoop to their level. You cannot force people to accept you, Medei. What you are doing is wrong.
What a difficult life you must have led, Isilor.
2021 social justice activist, is that you? Or are you just a standard 2000 villain? The story in Icewind Dale won't win any awards, but it is exactly what it needs to be. In my book, medieval fantasy games have to have lengthy voyages, unexpected turns of events that force you into perilous roads and super high stakes, and all those checkboxes are ticked in Icewind Dale too. As soon as the prologue is over, you get a taste of the very threat you're meant to put an end to, and not long after that, you're fending off a wave of invaders. From then on out is a non-stop high-stake adventure till the final showdown with the baddies. One thing that I like about the story in Icewind Dale 2 is that nothing feels plot convenient. There's no information withheld because you need not know it, no fortuitous event that saves you in the nick of time, nor any other bullshitous occurrence. Yes, there are a few exceptions, like the reasons why Oswald Fiddlebender leaves without you once his ship is fixed in Chapter 2, or the explanation that you're given as to why you can't take the Eastern Pass as you originally intended in Chapter 3. But they are minor slip-ups that didn't break the experience for me. While the structure of the story is sound and engaging, the quality of the dialogues is all over the place. Most of the time it's clever, witty, serious, and believable. And sometimes it's almost too painful to listen to or read. The trope of, haha, you're surely going to die because I am so much more powerful than you, so I guess there is no harm in telling you about my plan to the last detail, is the order of the day in Icewind Dale 2. And while the information they give you is useful and interesting, it's a painfully bad trope. Also, I found Aesir and Medea's glibness to be irritating for all the wrong reasons. Their story, as told by the rest of the characters in the game, especially Isilor, is a fascinating one. But every time I met them in the game, and this happens far more than it should, by the way, I was disappointed with their childlike smugness and attitude. Again, none of this changes the fact that I had a blast with the story in Icewind Dale 2, and when you come to think of it, it's pretty remarkable that the story is capable of keeping you engaged throughout more than 80 hours of gameplay. Also, I never thought I'd find Baldur's Gate levels of humor here, especially since the first Icewind Dale took itself a little bit more seriously.
In any event, as I was saying, Isilor sent me, the Archdruid. I mean, Isilor didn't send me the Archdruid. Isilor is the Archdruid, and he sent me.
Some of the dialogue options and some of the situations in Icewind Dale 2 can be surprisingly hilarious in a self-aware way. I like how the game constantly makes fun of the tropes in the genre while engaging in many of them very much on purpose. Overall, the story in Icewind Dale 2 is not great, but it's well beyond being merely serviceable. Companions lore-wise. As with the previous Icewind Dale, you create your entire party of adventurers from the get-go. There are no companions waiting to join your adventure, nor anyone else tagging along for the ride. There are a few pre-generated parties for you to choose from, and even being the customization hungry freak that I am, I was tempted to grab one of those and give it a try. They have interesting little backstories that sound like they would add extra flavor to your early adventuring. But even if you create your own party from scratch, the fact that you can import your own portraits, the fact that you have a neat array of voices to choose from, but very specially, the fact that this time around you have 3rd edition goodness in the form of skills, makes each of your characters feel unique and relevant to your adventure. But it's not only the skills available in the game that make it so. If your character is an ace bluffer, for example, he will have certain unique dialogue choices at hand. And those particular dialogue options are written in a way that makes them come off as overly confident, clever, or deceitful depending on the situation. And that's the kind of personality you can expect from an ace bluffer. This does a heck of a lot for the immersion, especially if you choose the right voice to go along with it.
Well, looks like I'm gonna have to go on a killing spree.
But most of this will happen in your mind, of course. Don't expect the game to provide you with relevant backstories for your characters, robust personalities, or anything resembling Campbell's hero's journey. They're just not flat as a pancake as they were in Icewind Dale. That's not good enough for me to say it's good, but I think it's as good as can be when you don't have scripted companions. Companions gameplay-wise. This is yet again a wet dream for those who are first and foremost concerned with the build of their party and its tactics. I just loved my party of adventurers all the way through. My druid got me through the 8 chambers in the monastery in Chapter 4 with her robust bag of talents, and through the Fellwood in Chapter 3 with her high wilderness skill. My thief bluffed us out of many combat encounters. My sorcerer saved us the trouble of finding a competent alchemist a couple of times, and my warrior saved us from a major confrontation with his high intimidation. My party's build and the tactics that I went for worked like charm every time. I can truly say that I played this game my way. I don't think I ever experienced this degree of satisfaction with my party gameplay-wise in any game. Honestly, if I could give it a 15 out of 10, I would. Secondary mechanics. There's something about the interface in Icewind Dale 2 that makes the experience feel right. Like the original versions of Baldur's Gate or Arcanum or Planescape Torment. Whatever it is, it was absent in Beamdog's Enhanced editions. I can't quite put my finger on it, but the user experience has an adequate medieval fantasy feel to it. But game design has come a long way in terms of user experience for secondary mechanics in the last 20 years, and that's why functions like buying, selling, looting, disarming traps, and opening locked chests feel a little bit dated. The worst offender is probably comparing items when you're equipping your gear or buying and selling. It's this aspect of the game, and the game design in Dragon's Eye Dungeon in Chapter 5, where the game shows its age. Spend enough time with it though, and halfway through the first chapter, you'll be back in the early 2000s with no complaints about the secondary mechanics. Sound effects and mix.
You have my attention, yes?
Icewind Dale 2 is plagued with volume issues, and no amount of fiddling around with the options will get that sorted out. The mix is also terrible at times, laughably so in fact. Many times the combat music would start to play several seconds after the fight had started, and sometimes it would also continue to play long after the fight was over.
Ready and willing. Aye. This one's mine.
The sounds per se aren't bad. There's interesting sounds for many of the spells and weapons. There's sounds for weapon swings and bows tensing and releasing, and there's decent ambient sound for most locations, but the mix just drags the whole package into meh territory. Voice acting.
You have already reversed our fortunes not once, but twice now. You have my gratitude. I think our position here is secure for at least a 10-day.
So you're the one who's been more trouble than a diva in the abyss. Throw down your arms and surrender, insignificant thing. Your journey, however impressive, ends here.
This is definitely not the series' strong suit. While voice acting in Baldur's Gate was so adequately immersive and fun that it made me wish it had been 100% voiced, the voices in Icewind Dale 2 would very often made me wish it had been 100% non-voiced. It's not terrible. Most characters are decent, but since some dialogue lines are super cheesy and on the nose about the character's alignment and personality, the voice acting comes off as on the nose too. And this happens with important characters like Izer and Mede. Also, I would have never expected the Archdruid in Kuldahar to be so...
Did my heart not so heavily weigh, I would celebrate your coming.
Irish. Music. I have 3 words for you about the soundtrack in Icewind Dale 2.
Amazing.
In fact, this was a very strong contender for best soundtrack for the entire Road to Baldur's Gate 3 series. I still think the score in the enhanced edition of Icewind Dale wins by a nose, that nose being the character creation track and the original Kuldahar track, but this is still a solid 10 out of 10. If I could give it a 15, I would. Graphics. Aside from character models, which are lacking in detail and overall not great, there's just something about the graphic quality in Icewind Dale 2 that I find enrapturing. Locations are fantastic and 100% lore consistent. There are no bland locations, and some of them are even interesting beyond anything we've seen so far in the series. I'd like to emphasize yet again the importance of lore consistency in the user experience design. From the details and mosaics in the hub to the stony-looking radial menu, call me old school, but this is proper experience design. At least from a graphics standpoint. I think monsters stand out in the graphic department. They are super cool looking and lore consistent. It does not escape me that Black Isle recycled 2 or 3 locations from Icewind Dale, but all of them look better than they did in the original game, especially Kuldahar. Also, there are so many locations in this game that this hardly feels like an act of laziness. This is no award winner though, and make no mistake about it, it wasn't an award winner back in the day. But the graphics in Icewind Dale 2 are adequately immersive and more than serviceable from end to end and from head to toe, interface and all. Performance and stability. What do you compare this game to? If you compare it to some of its peers from back in the day, like Temple of Elemental Evil or Arcanum, this game is a freaking 10 out of 10. I played it on a current gen PC with Windows 10 and I had absolutely no performance issues, save a screen going black here and there and the wave getting blocked a couple of times by annoying invisible walls that forced me to reload previous saved games, one of which happened of course in that dungeon that shall not be named, anymore at least. Nothing too serious or game breaking. Other considerations and final thoughts. Before I embarked upon this D&D crusade to relive some of these classic titles, to get a taste of the enhanced editions where applicable, and to prepare myself to sink my teeth into Baldur's Gate 3, there were only 3 games on our Road to Baldur's Gate 3 series that I hadn't already played. Siege of Dragonspear, the Heart of Winter expansion, and Icewind Dale 2. My only other consideration and final thought is that, after having played this game for the first time in 2021, I only wish I had done it sooner. And I still have a busy reviewing agenda and some requests from you guys. But you'll have to forgive me if I take a little break later this year to play this one again. And that should tell you all you need to know. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what we're doing in this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Share the video, but most importantly, never stop gaming, but don't let gaming get in the way of your hopes and dreams. Bye everyone.